Not a single enemy had ever made the Mafia boss lose his composure, until that night, when the guards found a 3-year-old girl standing alone before the gates of the estate, clutching a stuffed rabbit tightly in her arms. When Alessandro stepped out, the little girl only looked up at him with eyes identical to his own, and softly called, "Papa," and what lay inside the little girl's backpack was about to send the entire world that Alessandro had spent nearly 20 years building into upheaval. Alessandro did not answer at first. He knelt down instead, slowly, until his eyes were level with hers, a gesture that Marco Bianchi, his right hand for over 10 years, had never once seen him make in any room, for any purpose. Marco stood 2 feet away and did not move. The stillness told Alessandro something about the moment he already knew. The little girl did not look afraid. She looked at him carefully, the way one adult looks at another when trying to decide whether the room is going to be safe. "My name is Mia," she said. He did not have a response ready for that either, so he simply nodded once and reached for the small backpack sitting on the marble beside her. One of the guards stepped forward and lifted her gently into the hall, setting her on the long, low bench where guests waited before meetings. The stuffed rabbit came with her, tucked under one arm, unwilling to be separated. Alessandro carried the backpack to the console table and opened it. He removed the contents in the order he found them. A birth certificate, folded once, with his name and the name Elena Rossi on the parent lines. A stack of medical records, meticulously organized, held together by a plastic clip in the corner, the work of a mother who paid attention to every detail. An old photograph, taken outside a small restaurant in Brooklyn 4 years ago, 2 people caught in the particular ease of those who had stopped performing for each other, and a folded note, in handwriting he had not seen in 4 years. He opened it. "Mia is your daughter. I cannot keep her safe anymore. You can. I am sorry, Elena." He read it once, then he read it again, then he folded it and placed it back inside the envelope. He turned to Marco. He did not need to speak. Marco was already moving. Within 4 minutes, the entire perimeter of the estate was under sweep. Every camera, every gate, every road within half a mile. Within 15 minutes, the report was in his hand. There was no trace of Elena, no vehicle at the gate, no footprint beyond the one small pair of shoes still standing near the entrance where the guards had found her. She had gone, and she had gone carefully. He looked back at Mia. Mia was still watching him with the same steady attention. He carried her to the guest room himself. She fell asleep with the rabbit tucked beneath her chin, one small hand curled around its ear. Alessandro sat on the floor across from the bed with his back against the wall and watched her until well past midnight. He did not think in complete sentences. He watched her breathe. He watched the way her small fingers had loosened around the rabbit's ear only after her breathing had fully slowed, as though even her sleep had been holding out for reassurance. And somewhere in the second hour, without ever forming the words aloud, he made a decision that settled into him with the weight of something permanent. Whatever came next, this child would not be returned to uncertainty. Some of the most important decisions a man ever makes are the ones he never announces in any room. To understand what that decision meant, one has to understand what kind of man Alessandro Moretti was before it was made. New York is a city that has always known the weight of itself. Old money and old names, old grudges and old arrangements, layered on top of one another like sediment in the river beneath the bridges. The Moretti family had existed in that sediment for decades before Alessandro took over, but it had existed quietly, almost apologetically, the way organizations do when the man at the top has run out of ambition. Alessandro's father, Enzo Moretti, had been that kind of man for the last decade of his life, steady, cautious, unwilling to expand, and unwilling to consolidate. Under him, the Moretti name had drifted into a kind of dignified irrelevance among the 5 families of the East Coast. Enzo died of a stroke on a Wednesday afternoon in October, at his desk, with a half-finished cup of espresso beside his hand. Alessandro was 26 years old. The organization he inherited was bleeding from 4 directions at once. 3 senior members had already begun quiet conversations with rival groups. 2 of the family's most profitable freight contracts were up for renewal, and the partners on those contracts were taking calls from people who were not Moretti. A federal audit was circling one of the legitimate holding companies, and every man in every room was watching the 26-year-old to see whether he would panic or overreach or run. He did none of those things. He spent the first month doing nothing visible. He attended every meeting. He listened. He said very little. And when he spoke, he asked questions rather than gave orders. He reviewed every document, every contract, every financial record in the organization's history, going back to the year his grandfather had founded it. He slept 4 hours a night. He ate whatever was placed in front of him without noticing what it was. The men around him, who had been expecting either panic or aggression, did not know what to make of the silence. On the 32nd day, he called the 3 senior members who had been negotiating with rivals into a single room. He closed the door behind them himself. He spoke for less than 11 minutes, calmly, without raising his voice once. He told them that he knew every conversation they had been having, and with whom. He told them they had a choice to make before they left the room. 2 of them stayed. The 3rd did not. And the manner of his departure from the organization was handled in a way that the remaining men found clarifying. The freight contracts were renewed within the year, then expanded. The federal audit was quietly resolved through channels his father had never used. Within 4 years, the Moretti family was the most stable organization operating between New York and the Eastern Seaboard. Within 7, it was the one that other families measured themselves against. Alessandro had done all of this by understanding one thing about power that most men get wrong. Power is not about how much noise you make, it is about how much certainty you project, and certainty comes from never being caught without a plan. He had a plan for everything. He had never once had a plan for a 3-year-old girl who needed a sleeping rabbit. On the 2nd night, Mia did not fall asleep the way she had the night before. She lay in the middle of the guest room bed with the small gray rabbit Marco had procured within the first hour tucked against her chest. She had examined that rabbit very carefully before accepting it, turning it over in her hands, checking the ears, checking the seams, giving it the same quiet evaluation she seemed to give most things. And only when the examination was complete had she agreed to sleep with it in place of the original. Alessandro had watched her make that decision without commenting on it. Now she looked at him from the pillow. "You have to sit with me." He glanced at the chair by the window. "I can sit there." "No," she said, with the quiet authority of a child who was accustomed to a specific arrangement and saw no reason why a change of address should change it. "You have to sit by the bed. Mama always sits by the bed until I am asleep." He looked at her for a moment. Then he sat down on the floor beside the bed with his back against the frame. He was still wearing the suit he had put on that morning. He had not eaten dinner. His phone was in the other room. He did not move for a very long time. The room was quiet. Beyond the window, the faint sound of the estate at night, the low hum of the outer wall lights, the distant shift of a car in the drive, the small movements of the men on the perimeter. She listened to it for a while, then her breathing began to slow. Alessandro sat in the dark and remembered Brooklyn, 4 years earlier, an autumn evening. A small restaurant on a side street off Atlantic Avenue that served good seafood and had bad acoustics, the kind of place where the couple at the next table could hear everything if they tried, and both couples pretended otherwise. The sound of the subway running beneath the pavement had come up through the floor every few minutes, faint and reliable, like a heartbeat under the room. He had ended things with Elena Rossi that night. He had not been cruel. He had been honest in the particular way that a man is honest when he has already made a decision and does not want to leave room for it to be relitigated. He had told her that the world he lived in was the one he had chosen, that he was going to continue choosing it, and that it was not a life meant for a person like her. He had told her that he was not capable of being what she needed, and he was not willing to destroy what she was in the process of trying. She had listened to all of it without interrupting once. When he finished, she had looked at him for a long moment across the table and said, very quietly, "You are making this decision for both of us. That is very arrogant." He had not disagreed. She had stood up, put on her coat, and left. He had sat there for another 20 minutes, eating food he could not taste. Then he had gone back to his hotel, back to New York, and filed the whole thing into the place where he kept things that were finished. He had not known she was pregnant. Some chapters keep writing themselves long after we believe we have closed them. The next morning, Alessandro came down to the kitchen and found Mia already there. She was sitting on the counter beside the sink, small legs swinging slightly above the cabinets, the gray rabbit tucked against her side. She had climbed up on her own. He did not ask how. He simply noted, silently, that this was apparently the location she preferred, and that he was going to have to accept that as a piece of information about the world. He had told the kitchen staff not to come in that morning. He did not want anyone else in the room for this. "Good morning," he said. "Good morning," she said back, with the same steady seriousness she gave to most things. He tried to fix her hair before breakfast. He had watched Elena do it once, years ago, on a slow Sunday in Brooklyn, and he thought he remembered the general shape of the motion. He was wrong about that. Halfway through, Mia lifted the small hand mirror from the counter and inspected the result with a critical expression. His expression, exactly, the one he had spent 15 years directing at other men across other rooms. He had the specific and disorienting experience of being evaluated by his own eyes from the other side. "It is not straight," she said. not unkindly. "I can see that," he said. He did not attempt to fix it further. He suspected he would only make it worse. Breakfast came next. He had prepared it himself: eggs, toast, a small bowl of cut fruit, a glass of milk, and he set the plate carefully in front of her at the table. She looked at it. She picked up her fork. She began, very deliberately, to push the food toward the outer edges of the plate. She did not eat anything. He watched her do this for several minutes. She was not sulking. She was not being difficult. She was working. She moved the eggs to one side, the toast to another, the fruit to a third, adjusting each one until there was a clear ring of empty white porcelain between every item. When she was satisfied, she set the fork down and looked up at him and waited. He sat down across from her. "What is the problem?" he asked, directly, without condescension. "They are not supposed to touch," she said. He nodded once. He got up, took a second plate from the cabinet, and divided the meal between the 2 eggs on one plate, toast and fruit on the other, everything with clear space around it. She began to eat. She ate everything. He made a note to himself not to mention any of this to Marco. When she finished, she wiped her mouth with the small napkin, folded it in half, and set it beside the plate. Then she looked at him. "Do you have a study?" she said. "Yes, I want to see it." He led her down the hallway, opened the door, and stood aside. She walked into the room with the careful attention of an adult, assessing a space, looking at the bookshelves, the desk, the window, the rug, before turning back to him. "Is there a chair in here for me?" "No." That afternoon, without being asked, Marco quietly placed a small table and a small chair in the corner of the study. Some arrangements in a house change without any meeting being called to announce them. The juice box incident happened on the 3rd morning. She had asked for one at breakfast, and Alessandro had gone to the refrigerator, taken out the first small carton his hand landed on, and brought it to her at the counter. He inserted the straw. He set it down in front of her. She looked at the juice box. She did not say anything for several seconds. She simply looked at it, and the expression on her small face communicated, without the use of a single word, the full depth of her disappointment in the direction the morning had just taken. "That is the wrong one," she said finally. "I want the other one." He opened the refrigerator. There were 2 kinds. He had not previously known that there were 2 kinds of juice box in the world. It was a gap in his knowledge that no one in his organization had ever needed to address. He stood in front of the open refrigerator for a moment, considering the 2 small cartons on the second shelf, both of them from what appeared to be the same brand, both of them a similar color, both of them apparently manufactured by the same company. There was, he could now see, a small illustration on each. One had an apple, the other had a pear. "Which one?" he said. She pointed. He took it out. He inserted the straw. He now realized, inserted the straw on the first one, at slightly the wrong angle it had bent, folding against the small foil opening rather than passing cleanly through. He had also inserted it too fast, which had caused a small spray of juice to dot the outside of the carton, which he had then wiped away with his sleeve, an action he was now aware Mia had observed. He handed her the second juice box. She drank it without comment. He counted this, privately, as a victory. That evening, after she had gone to sleep, Alessandro sat at his desk and, at a moment when he could confirm that no one else was in the wing of the house, opened a browser on his laptop and watched a 2-minute instructional video about the correct method for inserting a straw into a juice box. It was, he discovered, a matter of angle and steady pressure. He watched it twice. Then he cleared the search history, closed the laptop, and never spoke of the exercise to any living person, and never intended to. The next morning he opened the juice box correctly. Mia drank it without comment. By the 5th day, Marco had become her favorite person in the building. Alessandro could not identify the specific moment it had happened. The development occurred so naturally, and so quickly, that by the time he registered it, it was already complete. Marco spoke to Mia normally, which she had apparently decided was the appropriate way to be addressed, and he did not make the particular faces that some adults made at children, which she found undignified. He asked her real questions about the drawings she made and listened to the answers. She began to save him things: a piece of fruit from her afternoon snack, a drawing folded neatly in half. The 7th night, Alessandro was at his desk. The house had gone quiet the way it did after 11, the outer wall lights on their low setting, the men on the perimeter walking their circuits, the small sounds of the estate settling around him in a shape he had known for years. He had a stack of operational reports in front of him, 3 of them time-sensitive, one requiring a signature before morning. His pen moved through the margins in the same steady rhythm it had moved through margins for a decade. The soft sound of small bare feet on the hallway floor came at 10 minutes past 11. He did not look up immediately. He finished the sentence he was on. Then he set the pen down. Mia was standing in the doorway of the study in her pajamas, the gray rabbit tucked under one arm. "I cannot sleep," she said. "Why not?" She thought about the question seriously, the way she thought about most things. Her small brow drew together for a moment as she worked through the answer. "The quiet here is different," she said. "At our house, the quiet has cars in it. Here it is just quiet." He looked at her for a moment. Then he set the report aside. "Come in." She came in. She walked past him without ceremony, went directly to the large leather chair beside his desk, the one he never used, the one that had been in the study since his father's time, and climbed into it. The rabbit came with her. She arranged herself carefully against one of the armrests, drew her small legs up beneath her, and settled the rabbit against her chest. Then she was still. Alessandro turned back to his desk and resumed working. She did not speak. She did not fidget. She sat beside him in the chair with the rabbit, and the quiet in the room was, for a while, the quiet of two people who had agreed to occupy the same silence. He read through the first report. He signed it. He moved to the second. Somewhere between the second and the third, he became aware that her breathing had changed slower, deeper, the small rhythm of it settling into something evener than before. He glanced over. She was asleep. She had fallen sideways in the chair, one cheek pressed against the leather, the rabbit tucked beneath her chin exactly where she always wanted it. Her small hand had gone loose around its ear. He did not move her. He finished the third report, then the fourth. He started a fifth. He let her sleep beside him in the quiet that was just quiet, and he did not look at her more than once every few minutes, which for him, that week, was a form of restraint. Just after 2 in the morning, he finished what he could reasonably finish. He rose, set the papers in order, and lifted her carefully out of the chair. She did not wake. He carried her down the hall to the guest room and laid her in the bed. Then, with more care than he had known he possessed, he tucked the rabbit under her chin, exactly the way she liked it. He stood in the doorway for a moment before turning out the light. Learning a new quiet with another person is, in its own way, a form of intimacy. Alessandro enrolled Mia at a small private preschool 12 days after she had arrived. He did so under a different surname, a security decision he made without discussion, and one Marco simply implemented within the hour. The school was in a quiet neighborhood in Brooklyn Heights, small enough that every parent was known, large enough that no one child stood out. He drove her himself 2 mornings a week. On the other days, Marco drove her, with a second car following in escort. The other parents in the drop-off line noticed the arrangement. None of them asked. Her teacher was a woman named Miss Rachel. Miss Rachel was in her early 40s, patient, experienced, and entirely unintimidated by the tall, silent man who appeared in the parking lot twice a week and crouched down to Mia's level on the sidewalk before she went inside. Every morning, he said something to Mia that Miss Rachel could not hear from where she stood at the gate. Every morning, Mia nodded very seriously in response. Then she ran through the gate with the small backpack bouncing against her shoulders, and Alessandro straightened and stood for a moment on the sidewalk watching her go. Miss Rachel had seen a great many things in 20 years of teaching. She did not ask. In the 3rd week, during circle time, she asked each of the children to say something about their family. She meant it gently, the kind of question that produced simple answers about mothers and grandfathers and pets, and she went around the circle patiently. When she reached Mia, Mia thought about the question carefully. "My papa is very serious," she said, "but he learned how to open the juice box." Miss Rachel did not write that down. The circle continued. 2 children spoke about brothers. 1 spoke about a cat. Then Mia raised her hand again. "My papa has a lot of friends who stand outside," she added. Miss Rachel did not write that down either. She simply nodded, smiled the small, warm smile she gave to all of them, and moved on to the next child. "Before we go any further into what happens next, I want to ask you to do something. If this story has you, if you are somewhere right now where you were supposed to be doing something else, and you are still here, take a moment and subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Because the part of this story that is about to unfold what Alessandro is about to discover about his own past, what the people who have been watching him from a distance have already been planning, and what it costs a man like him to love something he cannot control, that is the part that will stay with you long after the video ends. If you know someone who loves a story that goes deep, share this with them, and stay with me. The house has just gotten quiet enough for a small girl to sleep through the night in it. In another house, in another state, A very patient man has just been handed a report he has been waiting 3 years to receive. What he does with that report is going to change everything. 6 weeks after Mia arrived, a report landed on Victor Romano's desk in New Jersey. Victor was 55 years old. His office sat on the top floor of a warehouse building on the west side of the Hudson, unremarkable from the outside, arranged inside with the quiet precision of a man who had long ago stopped needing to impress anyone. He had watched Alessandro Moretti for 3 years, not with hostility, exactly, but with the focused patience of a man who understood that every structure, no matter how solid it appeared from the outside, had a place where it had been built around a gap. He had been looking for Alessandro's gap. He had found nothing, no vice, no debt, no relationship that could be leveraged, no mistress in an apartment in the city, no gambling account tucked away in another name, no old grievance sitting unresolved with a former partner, no loyalty outside the organization that could be redirected. Alessandro Moretti did not drink to excess. He did not owe anyone. He did not sleep with the wives of dangerous men. He did not, so far as 3 years of careful observation had revealed, have a single point of pressure that could be applied. Victor had begun to suspect that perhaps there was nothing. Then the report came. It was slim 3 pages, prepared by a man who had learned to write reports for Victor, and to include only what mattered. It said that there was now a child at the Moretti estate, 3 years old. A birth certificate had been located through channels that took some effort to access, with both parents' names on the parent lines. The father was Alessandro. The mother was a woman named Elena Rossi, Italian-American, a private citizen with no criminal record and no known ties to any organization. She had appeared on the estate's exterior security footage for less than a minute on a single evening 6 weeks earlier. She had not been seen since. Victor read the report once. Then he read it a second time. Then he read it a third. Then he pressed a small button on his desk phone. His inner circle gathered in the conference room within 20 minutes. 4 men, all of whom had been with him longer than they had been with any wife. He did not sit. He walked to the head of the table with the report in his hand and set it down flat, and looked at the 4 of them, and spoke very quietly. "The man who had nothing to lose," he said, "now has something to lose. I want to understand exactly how much." There was a small silence in the room. Then he gave his instructions. "Watch the estate. Watch the schedule. Document every deviation from every prior pattern. Find out where the child goes during the day. Find out who drives her. Find out who watches her when Alessandro is not in the building. Do it slowly. Do it carefully. Do it in a way that leaves no signature that Alessandro's people could identify." The 4 men nodded and left the room. Victor stood alone by the window for a long time, looking out over the Hudson toward the New York skyline. 3 years of hunting for Alessandro's weakness had given him a patience that did not come naturally to him. That patience was now, at last, going to be repaid. The most patient hunter is always the one who has learned, from many failures, that timing matters more than strength. Victor's men watched the estate for 2 weeks. They watched from a distance that did not draw attention. They rotated vehicles. They rotated men. They rotated the angles from which they observed the outer gate. And they recorded everything. They recorded the change in the morning schedule, Alessandro's car pulling out at 7:40 rather than 8:15, taking the same route across the Brooklyn Bridge 2 mornings each week, returning within the hour without the child. They recorded the second car on the other 3 mornings, a discreet dark sedan driven by Marco Bianchi, followed at a careful distance by an escort vehicle carrying 2 men. They recorded the evening pattern, the meetings at the estate now ending at 7 in the evening rather than 9 or 10, the study lights going dark earlier than they had in 3 years, the guest wing lights coming on at times that had never previously registered on any of Victor's surveillance logs. They recorded, in short, the way a man who had never once reorganized his professional life for anything personal had, in 6 weeks, reorganized everything. Victor looked at all of it and made his calculation. He had, in reserve, a single asset he had been keeping for exactly the right moment. There was an international consortium, Dutch and Italian, and 1 South Korean partner 3 months away from finalizing a $1 billion freight arrangement with the Moretti family. It was the deal Alessandro had spent the last 14 months building. Every route, every partner, every legal structure, every regulatory clearance had been negotiated one careful piece at a time. It was, by any measure, the largest single transaction the Moretti organization had ever entered into. Victor had a contact inside the consortium. He had recruited that contact 18 months earlier and had spent the intervening time doing absolutely nothing with him. The contact sat quietly at the negotiating table, took his salary, attended his meetings, and waited. Victor had been keeping him in reserve for exactly the moment when using him would produce the maximum possible cost. He had found that moment. Victor drafted the message to Alessandro himself. He did not delegate it. He wrote it in a single sitting, without any assistance, at his desk with the window overlooking the Hudson at dusk. The message was short. Come to the signing alone. Reduce the security at the residence for 2 hours on the morning of the signing. The consortium deal closes without incident. Deviate from that arrangement in any way, bring extra men, change the schedule, notify any outside party, and the deal collapses before the ink touches the paper. Everything you have spent 14 months building will disappear in the length of a single phone call. He read it once. He sent it through the appropriate channel. He was certain with the certainty of a man who had spent 3 years watching, and who understood how men in Alessandro's position calculated that this would force Alessandro into an impossible choice. The empire or the child. He would have to pick one. Victor believed this because he had done the calculation the way he had always done it. He did not understand that he was operating on an assumption that had stopped being true on the morning Alessandro sat on the floor of the guest room and watched a 3-year-old girl fall asleep. Assumptions are the only ammunition a hunter can fire without ever knowing that he has missed. It was a Sunday afternoon. The message from Victor Romano was in Alessandro's jacket pocket. He had read it twice that morning, folded it, and put it away. He had not yet responded. He had, however, already begun to think about it, in the slow, careful way he thought about things that mattered, and part of what he was thinking about was the small girl sitting at the little table in the corner of the living room, drawing. She was drawing with the focused seriousness she gave to everything. A row of colored pencils was arranged in a specific order along the edge of the table, an order she had established the first time Marco had bought them for her, and had maintained without deviation ever since. Her tongue was pressed against the inside of her cheek. She was working on something. Alessandro walked into the living room, and, without ceremony, sat down on the floor beside the small table. It had become a habit sometime in the second week. She talked more when they were at the same level, a small piece of information he had discovered by accident and had filed away without comment. "What are you drawing?" he asked. "Our house," she said, "and Papa and Uncle Marco." He looked at the drawing. The house was large and slightly lopsided, with too many windows and a door that opened somewhere near the middle of the roof. That was fair. The figure that was him was taller than the house and appeared to have no neck, which was also fair. The figure that was Marco was almost as tall and appeared to be smiling, which was, in Alessandro's estimation, generous. "And where are you?" he asked. She pointed to a small figure in the middle, between the two tall ones. Round head, arms out to both sides, holding something that appeared to be a rabbit. "In the middle," she said. "Where I belong." He looked at the drawing for a moment longer than he needed to. "Yes," he said quietly. "Where you belong." That evening, after she had gone to bed, he took the drawing to the kitchen and pressed it flat against the refrigerator with the small magnetic fish she had chosen at a market near the preschool 3 weeks earlier. He straightened it carefully. He stepped back once to make sure it was straight. Then he stepped back again. For 3 years, Mia had been drawing without him. Elena had, he did not doubt, kept every one of those drawings, tucked into a folder somewhere in whatever small apartment they had been living in, a folder full of houses and horses and small round-headed figures, none of which included him. This was the first drawing in which he appeared, and he was the tallest figure in the house. She had not said, "Papa and Mama." She had said, "Papa and Uncle Marco." That sat in his chest, uncomfortably, for the rest of the evening. It was not anger at Elena. He had no room for anger at Elena on the subject of what Mia had drawn. It was a hollow recognition of something else, that his daughter had chosen to draw the family she had, and not the family she was supposed to have. Children know things about a house long before the adults in it are ready to be reminded. It was a Tuesday evening, 10 days before the signing. The question had been sitting in Alessandro for 6 weeks, from the morning Mia had arrived. Marco had stood in the entrance hall that morning in a specific way, bodyguard still, the way a man stands when he is not surprised by what he is seeing, and Alessandro had registered that stillness at the time and had filed it away without addressing it, because there had been too many other immediate things to address. But he had grown tired of waiting. He called Marco into the study after dinner and closed the door behind him himself. Marco did not sit. He did not ask why he had been called. He simply stood in the middle of the room, hands loose at his sides, and waited. Alessandro remained behind the desk. "How did you know?" he said. Marco looked at him. "How did you know to send her the message?" Alessandro said. "How did you know Elena needed to bring Mia here before Romano's men found them? How did you have a secured channel to reach her at all?" Marco did not answer at first. He stood in the middle of the study, the same study he had stood in 1,000 times over 12 years. In every kind of conversation a man in his position could stand in, and he looked at Alessandro across the desk, and he did not say anything for a moment that was noticeably longer than comfortable. Then he began to speak. "There was a security review," he said. 3 years ago. Standard procedure. A routine sweep of your personal history for vulnerabilities. It was scheduled. You approved it. It went out under my name because it always does." Alessandro nodded once. He remembered the review. He had approved it without reading the scope in detail, the way he approved a great many things that ran through Marco. During that sweep, we ran a wider financial check than the standard scope required. It picked up an anomaly. A clinic payment in Miami, modest, private, paid in a way that was clean but not commercial. The name on the payment record was Elena Rossi. The date lined up precisely with the Brooklyn timeline. The study went very quiet. Alessandro did not move. He sat behind the desk with his hands flat on the wood, and he did not move. "I confirmed it through a second channel," Marco said. "It was a first trimester obstetric appointment. I confirmed it a third way. I had the result in my hand within 72 hours of the initial anomaly appearing on the sweep." He paused. "I sat with that information for a long time, longer than I have ever sat with any piece of information in 12 years of working for you." Alessandro said nothing. Marco did not fill the silence. He waited, evenly, the way a man waits who has already decided that the next thing he says is going to change the shape of the room he is standing in. The study was very quiet. Alessandro was aware, in a slow, deliberate way, that Marco had not yet finished. Whatever had just been said was only the opening of what was coming. Marco had not been summoned to explain a single decision. Marco had been summoned to explain 3 years. And he did not yet know what the second half of that confession was about to break in the structure of trust he had spent 2 decades building. Marco began again. "I decided not to bring it to you," he said. He said it directly, without softening the shape of what it was. "I believed, and I will say this straight, because there is no other way to say it, that the Alessandro of those years would have done one of 2 things. You would have dismissed the information as impossible, or you would have acted on it in a way that drove her further and faster into protection. You would have gone to Miami yourself. You would have appeared at her door, and she would have taken the child and disappeared into a place neither of us could have followed." Alessandro did not move. "So I watched them instead," Marco said, quietly, from a distance, through a network of contacts I have maintained without your authorization and without your knowledge. For 3 years, I have known where they were. I have known when they moved apartments. I have known when Mia was ill. I have known when Elena took a second job. I did not intervene. I did not make contact. I only watched. And I only watched to make sure they were safe." The study was very quiet. 6 weeks ago, Marco said, the surveillance signatures of Victor Romano's people appeared in the same digital space I had been quietly occupying. Not aimed at us. Aimed at Elena. I understood immediately what it meant. He paused. "I sent Elena a message within the hour. 3 sentences. She is in danger. Bring the child to New York. Now." He met Alessandro's eyes. She appeared on our security footage 11 seconds later. She had already been moving. Alessandro sat behind the desk without moving. The silence in the study was the longest one in 12 years of working together. Neither man broke it. The small clock on the shelf marked the seconds. The house around them made its low sounds. Somewhere down the hall, a door closed softly, one of the night staff. Moving through the estate on their circuit. 3 years, Alessandro said finally. His voice was even. "You watched my daughter grow up for 3 years. I watched them to make sure they were safe," Marco said. "When they stopped being safe, I moved. That decision was mine. You took it from me." "Yes." Marco did not argue the point. It was true, and he had known it was true when he made the choice. And he had made the choice anyway. Alessandro looked down at the desk, then at his own hands, flat on the wood. He did not speak for a long moment. "Where is she now?" "Moving. Last confirmed location, Miami. She is careful and she is fast. But Romano is patient." Alessandro nodded slowly. "Keep tracking her. I do not want her to know we are watching. When we have a stable location, we go and get her. She has been running long enough." Marco nodded, once the single nod of a man who had been carrying something heavy for a long time, and had finally been allowed to set it down, slightly, at the edge. He turned toward the door. "Marco." He stopped. Alessandro looked at him for a long moment. "You kept them safe for 3 years, he said. "I am not going to pretend that means nothing." Marco said nothing. He nodded once more. Then he left. Alessandro sat alone in the study for a long time. Alessandro left the study and went to find Mia. She was in the living room, at the small table Marco had installed in the corner, with the row of colored pencils arranged in their specific order along the edge of the wood. The gray rabbit was propped against the leg of the chair, watching the proceedings with detached patience. He walked over and, without ceremony, sat down on the floor beside the table. "What are you drawing?" he asked. "A horse," she said. He looked at the drawing. The horse was small and brown, standing sideways across the middle of the page, with a mane that appeared to be moving slightly even though nothing in the picture was moving. He considered it for a moment. "That is a very good horse," he said. She looked at it critically. "The legs are wrong," she said. "You can fix the legs." "I know." She picked up the pencil. She was quiet for a moment, working. He watched her small hand move, the careful pressure, the pause to consider the next line, the slight adjustment of the paper. She was not rushed. She approached the horse with the same focused seriousness she approached her breakfast plate, her rabbit, and every other object in the world she had decided deserved attention. "Papa? Yes? When is Mama coming?" He looked at her from the side as she worked on the horse's legs, focused, unhurried, 3 years old, and asking the question in the exact same tone she would have used to ask where the rabbit was or whether there was still banana milk in the refrigerator. "Soon," he said. She nodded. She did not look up. "Okay," she said. "She will like it here. The quiet is different, but you get used to it." He watched her fix the horse's legs and said nothing. He stayed on the floor beside her until she decided the drawing was finished, which took another 20 minutes. When it was done, she held it up so he could see it properly. He took it in both hands and looked at it seriously while she explained to him which parts she was happy with and which parts she would do differently next time. The tail was better than last time. The mane was too dark. The back legs were now correct, but the front legs still needed work. He listened to every word. He thanked her for showing him. He said the horse was better than any horse he had seen recently. He meant it. That night, after she had gone to sleep, he called his attorney before going to bed himself. "The contingency structure," he said. "The alternative holding arrangement. I need it finalized. 10 days. There was a small pause on the other end. "That was insurance," his attorney said. "It is now the plan," Alessandro said. 10 days. He ended the call. He set the phone on the nightstand. He sat on the edge of the bed for a moment in the dark, and he did not think about Victor Romano, or the consortium, or the message folded in his jacket pocket. He thought about a small girl who had nodded when he said soon, and had believed him without checking. A child's trust is the one kind of responsibility that cannot be renegotiated once it has been accepted. The recital notice came home in Mia's preschool backpack on a Tuesday. It was a small printed sheet, slightly crumpled from living at the bottom of the backpack under a drawing she had made and a half-eaten rice cracker for which no one in the household was willing to claim responsibility. Alessandro found it that evening when he was checking through her bag, not because anyone had told him to, but because it had turned out that small children carried home an entire ecosystem of paper and objects and things that required a response by a specific date, and if no one checked the bag, these things went unaddressed, and then there were consequences. He read it twice. Thursday afternoon, 2 weeks away. Parents and family were welcome. The children would perform songs they had been practicing. Please arrive 15 minutes early. Please dress the child in something they feel proud of. He walked to the kitchen. He took the small magnetic fish Mia had chosen at the market near the preschool 3 weeks earlier, the one already holding her drawing of the house and the 2 tall figures, and he used a second one to press the recital, notice flat against the refrigerator door beside it. He stepped back once to make sure it was straight. He stepped back a second time. 4 days later, his attorney called. "The consortium has proposed a date for the signing," he said. Alessandro was standing at the kitchen counter. He looked across the room toward the refrigerator. The recital notice was still there, still perfectly straight, still held in place by the small magnetic fish. Which day? Thursday afternoon. There was a small pause. Same day, same time window. Alessandro did not answer immediately. He looked at the refrigerator. He looked at the recital notice. He looked at the small drawing beside it, the crooked house, the 2 tall figures without necks, the small round-headed figure in the middle holding a rabbit. He turned back to the phone. "Confirm the date. Are you certain? We can attempt to confirm it. And I want the contingency structure ready by the end of the week. Complete, executable, every signature in place." The attorney did not question that a second time. Alessandro ended the call and set the phone down on the counter. The contingency structure was a counter-document his legal team had been quietly building for 6 weeks, an alternative holding arrangement that rerouted the entire consortium transaction through a new corporate entity, one that removed every leverage point Victor's inside contact had been positioned to exploit. It did not just close the door on that particular vulnerability. It removed the door from the wall entirely. The access point simply did not exist in the new structure. There was nothing there for anyone to pull. Alessandro had commissioned it as insurance nearly 2 months before Mia arrived. He had done so on the morning he first identified an anomaly in the consortium's secondary legal representation, a small irregularity in the way a piece of routine documentation had been drafted, small enough that no one else had noticed it, specific enough that it told him someone on the inside was not entirely on his side. He had built the answer before he knew he would need it. That was how he had always operated. You build the answer before the question becomes urgent, because by the time it is urgent, you have already lost the space to think clearly. He looked at the recital notice on the refrigerator. He was going to be at both. Victor's message arrived on the morning of the signing. Alessandro read it at the kitchen counter at 7 in the morning. Mia was 3 feet away at the small end of the table, eating breakfast with the careful attention of someone ensuring that nothing on her plate had made unauthorized contact with anything else. The gray rabbit was propped in the chair beside her, watching her breakfast with the same detached patience with which it watched most things. He read the message twice. He folded it. He put it in the inside pocket of his jacket. Papa. He looked at her. Papa has the thinking face. Papa is always thinking. A different thinking face, she said, chewing a small piece of pear with careful precision. A worried one. He looked at her for a moment. Eat your food. I am eating it, she said, evenly. I can eat and notice things at the same time. He sat down across from her. She was right. She absolutely could. Everything is fine, he said. She looked at him with his own eyes, the same eyes that had been reading people in rooms for 15 years, and he had the specific experience of being assessed by them from the other side of the table. It was not a comfortable experience. It was not meant to be. She held the look for a few seconds longer than a 3-year-old should have been capable of holding it. Then she seemed to decide something, and the tension in her small face relaxed. Okay, she said. She went back to her food. He watched her eat for a moment. Then he stood, took his coffee to the counter, and made a phone call. We are using the contingency structure, he said. Bring it to the signing. Understood. He ended the call. Before he left the residence, he crouched down to Mia's level in the entrance hall the way he always did in the mornings before she went out for the day. She stood in front of him in her small jacket, with the backpack already on her shoulders, one hand holding the rabbit, the other hand loose at her side. She looked at him with the focused attention she gave everything. Papa will be there today, he said. Papa has something to finish first. Papa will be a little late, but Papa will be there. How late? Not very. She studied him. Last time Papa said not very, she said. It was very. He looked at her. He had been 40 minutes late to the preschool family lunch 3 weeks earlier because a freight negotiation had run over and he had not been able to leave the room. Mia had not mentioned it at the time. She had eaten her sandwich, said hello to Miss Rachel, and gone back to her afternoon activities without comment. She had, apparently, been keeping it. Papa will be there before you finish, he said. You have my word. She held his gaze for a moment the way he held people's gaze in rooms when he needed to assess whether what they were saying was true. Then she nodded. Okay. He watched Marco drive her through the estate gates, the second car falling in behind them at the correct distance. Then he went back inside and called his attorney. The conference suite was on one of the upper floors of a tower in the Manhattan Financial District. It was a room full of consortium representatives and translators and the careful atmosphere of an arrangement that had taken 14 months to reach this point. The long table ran the length of the room. Water carafes had been placed at precise intervals. The blinds had been half drawn against the late morning light. Every man and woman at the table had, in some way, been preparing for this hour for a very long time. Alessandro arrived with his legal team and took his seat at the head of the table. He looked at the room with the expression he brought into every room, which was, in effect, no particular expression at all. He nodded once to the consortium's lead representative across the table. He set a slim folder in front of him. Victor's contact sat 3 seats to Alessandro's left. Alessandro had known the man's identity for 11 days. He had said nothing about it. He had not changed his demeanor toward him in any way, because the value of knowing something is directly proportional to the length of time you can resist showing that you know it. The proceedings began. Documents were circulated. Translators worked in low voices along the length of the table. Signatures were confirmed on preliminary pages. The lead representative walked the room through the final structure of the arrangement, with the measured cadence of a man who had rehearsed the sequence twice that morning. The room had the dense, focused energy of a large amount of money in the process of changing its shape into something binding. At the moment the primary signing document arrived at the center of the table, Alessandro's attorney placed a second folder beside it. The room paused. The second folder contained the counter document. It restructured the entire arrangement through a new corporate holding entity that had been legally established 9 days earlier. It achieved everything the primary document achieved, for every party at the table, with one significant difference. The specific access point that Victor's contact had been positioned to control had been architecturally removed. It did not exist in the new structure. There was nothing there for anyone to pull. The contact looked at the second document. Then he looked at Alessandro. Alessandro was not looking at him. He was looking at the consortium's lead representative, who had begun to explain the restructure in the patient and specific tone of a man who had prepared thoroughly and had time. The contact reached inside his jacket for his phone. He needed to signal Victor. He needed instructions. He found the phone. He looked at the screen. There was a message already waiting for him, sent 4 minutes earlier, from a number he did not recognize. It contained a single line. "Whatever you are about to do, understand that we already know you are going to do it." He put the phone back into his jacket. The signing proceeded. Every party at the table signed the counter document. The consortium's lead representative countersigned. The lawyers stamped. The translators annotated. The transaction closed in 38 minutes. Alessandro set the pen down. He closed the folder in front of him. He looked around the table. "Thank you," he said. "Please excuse me. I have somewhere to be." He rose. He nodded once to the lead representative. He walked out. 6 minutes later, he was in the car. Marco was in the front row of the small preschool auditorium, exactly as he had been instructed to be. Securing a front row seat had required him to arrive 20 minutes before the performance began, which had, in turn, required him to sit in a room full of parents and grandparents and younger siblings for 20 full minutes before anything happened. It had been an experience. He had processed it silently, from behind the professional stillness of a man who had spent 12 years standing beside other men in every kind of room. He would process the rest of it later, alone, and would never speak of it to any living person. He had his phone in his hand. He had been sending Alessandro running updates. 12 minutes into the program, Mia stepped into position on the small stage. She was in the yellow dress. She had been in the yellow dress from the moment she had been allowed to put it on that morning, and she had vetoed all suggestions that she wear anything else beneath it. In spite of the temperature and negotiation, Marco had ultimately resolved by acquiring a very thin, long-sleeved undershirt that she had agreed to on the specific condition that it not show at the collar. It did not show at the collar. He had checked twice before they left the house. The children began the first song. Mia was third from the left. She performed with the focused seriousness of someone who had practiced, and who had taken the practice seriously, which Marco had expected, because she approached everything that way. Her mouth formed the words at the correct moments. Her small hands moved through the small, choreographed motions with careful precision, but her eyes were scanning the audience. Marco could see them moving across the rows in the systematic way that Alessandro scanned a room left to right, back to front, checking each face against a specific expected one, and he felt something in his chest that he was not going to name in any report he ever filed, in any form, at any point. He glanced at the door. 14 minutes into the performance, the door opened. Alessandro came in quietly, still in the suit he had worn to the signing. He found a position at the back of the room and took it up without disturbing the row nearest him. He was not subtle about his size. He was not built for a room designed for parents in small chairs, but he was quiet about it. He found the stage. He found his daughter. She found him in the same moment. She waved. It was a small, deliberate wave, one wave, just for him. Her hand came up and moved twice and then went back down to her side, because she was performing, and she was serious about the performance. But her small face changed. The scanning stopped. Something in her shoulders eased. Alessandro raised his own hand once in return. Marco, facing forward, did not turn around. He looked at the small stage with the expression of a man entirely focused on the performance and unaffected by anything happening in the room behind him. He looked at the ceiling once. Then he looked back at the stage. Mia caught his eye and pointed to her own face, then pointed to his, the gesture they had practiced, the reminder to smile. And Marco produced the expression that was the closest thing to a smile he had produced in a professional context in 12 years. She gave him a small, approving nod. Then she went back to the performance. What happened to Victor Romano and the Romano family in the weeks that followed was thorough and unhurried. Alessandro identified every access point the group had been using against Moretti operations and closed them, one at a time. Freight routes, protection contracts. 2 business relationships the Romano organization had been quietly cultivating with partners on the edges of Moretti territory were severed in a manner that made the partners understand, clearly, that further cultivation would be expensive for them. Victor had built the entire move on a calculation about what Alessandro valued. He had gotten the calculation wrong. It was not a small error. Alessandro did not think about him much. He had other things to think about. Marco placed a location on Alessandro's desk on a Monday morning. Miami. Street. Building. Floor. She is still moving, Marco said. But she has been at this address for 8 days. That is the longest she has stayed anywhere. She is tired. Alessandro looked at the address. Go and get her. Take 2 men. Bring her somewhere they are not looking. Somewhere with warm weather. She grew up in Boston. She does not like the cold. Marco looked at him for a moment. Charleston. Alessandro nodded once. 3 days later, Marco called from Charleston. She is here. She is safe. She has questions. I am not the right person to answer them. Alessandro sat alone in his office for a moment. Then he dialed. It rang twice. Alessandro. Her voice came through exactly as he remembered it. Careful, tired, still completely itself. She is all right, he said. I need you to know that before anything else. The sound she made was not a word. It was the sound of something being released. He told her about the preschool and the morning routine. He told her about the food that could not touch. He told her about the sleeping rabbit and the playing rabbit, which had turned out to be 2 different rabbits with 2 different job descriptions. He told her about the juice box, which he had not told anyone, and he heard something that might have been a small, quiet laugh underneath the careful stillness of her breathing. He told her about the recital, the yellow dress, the wave from the stage. He told her about the drawing of the house, with the tall figure that had no neck. She put herself in the middle, he said. She said that was where she belonged. There was a long silence on the line. Does she ask about me? Every night? Before she closes her eyes. I tell her you are safe, and she says okay, and she sleeps. She trusts it. She trusts it the same way she trusts everything I tell her completely, and without checking. That trust is the most serious thing that has ever been handed to me. I do not intend to be wrong about it. Elena was quiet. Come back, he said. We will figure out what this needs to be slowly. No pressure. No decisions that do not need to be made yet. But come back. The silence on the line was long and full. Okay, she said. Elena arrived on a Wednesday evening, 3 weeks later. Marco met her at JFK and called ahead from the car. Alessandro told Mia at dinner that someone was coming that night, someone who loved her very much and had missed her every single day. Mia put her fork down. Is it Mama? Yes. She picked her fork back up and finished her dinner with great efficiency, because there were things to do before Mama arrived, beginning with putting on the good pajamas instead of the plain ones. When the door opened, Mia was standing in the entrance hall in the good pajamas with the rabbit tucked under her arm, and her hair done in the specific way Alessandro had learned to do it over the course of 8 weeks, of watching short instructional videos and quietly practicing on a small stuffed animal in his study, a fact he had also never told anyone. Elena stepped inside. She saw her daughter. She stopped. Mia looked at her mother for 1 full second, then she ran the full length of the hallway, bare feet on the marble floor, the rabbit trailing behind her. Elena went down to her knees and caught her, and she held her with both arms wrapped all the way around, and her face pressed into her daughter's hair, and she stayed there. Alessandro stood in the kitchen doorway. He did not move. He did not speak. He did not try to make his face do anything in particular. After a long moment, Mia pulled back just enough to look at her mother's face. She put one small hand on Elena's cheek. I knew you were safe, she said. Papa told me. Elena looked at her daughter. Then she looked up, across the length of the hallway, at Alessandro. He held her gaze. 4 years between them. 1 child. A road ahead that neither of them had a full map for. But Mia was between them in the hallway, exactly where she had drawn herself, exactly where she said she belonged. That was enough for tonight. The rest would be figured out slowly. 3 Sundays later, the kitchen had a different quality to it. Elena was making coffee, having assessed the residents' existing coffee situation on her first morning and sent Marco a list, which Marco had fulfilled within 2 hours without being asked twice. Mia was on the counter in her usual place, narrating. Mama is measuring it. Papa does not measure. Papa just puts it in. That explains the coffee, Elena said. The coffee is very strong. Papa's coffee could strip paint. Alessandro, at the table with a document he was no longer reading, said nothing. Papa smiles more now, Mia told her mother. I taught him. Elena glanced over her shoulder. Alessandro kept his eyes on the document. Mia looked at both of them with the evaluating expression of a 3-year-old who had reached a conclusion. "We are all here now," she said. Certain, simple, final. No one argued. The life lesson at the heart of this story is a quiet one. An enemy looks at a child and sees a weakness. A father looks at the same child and sees a reason. It is the same small human being, and the two definitions are entirely opposite. The difference does not live in the child. It lives in the eyes of the person looking. A man who builds his life around control will always experience love as loss of control. A man who has learned that some things are worth more than control will experience the same love as the very thing that finally lets him come home. Now I would like to ask you something. If you had spent 20 years building an empire, and one small person walked through your gates and asked you to choose, what would you choose? Have you ever, in your own life, had a moment when someone very small reminded you of who you actually wanted to be? I would love for you to share your story down in the comments. Read the other comments too. You will be surprised how much of your own experience is already waiting there in someone else's words. If this story touched something in you, please press like, subscribe to our channel, turn on notifications, and share this video with someone who you think needs to hear it today. Every like, every comment, every share helps us keep bringing you stories that stay with you long after the video ends. Wishing you good health, quiet days, and a life full of small, ordinary joys. May you always have someone to come home to. Goodbye, and see you in the next video.